start the recording as we go along. So we are now recording live with Makonnen Sankofa, and which is an author, a journalist, and so many other things. Actually, you have to tell me, Makone, that what is it you do? Just a brief introduction. I want to hear it from you because I have done some research about especially your book. You popped up on the radar. Now it is actually weird how things happen. You know how you actually connect or find people, they sort of randomly come out of everywhere. So I was very, very interesting in this book you have done, the regarding the Rastafarian culture, and I was very, very impressed. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so we'll go more into the book, I'm sure, as the interview progresses. That'll be the main thing we talk about. Just to give a brief introduction to me, I'm a Pan-African activist. So as many other things, I'm author of the book, The Rise of Rastafari. I'm also a public speaker. So I have a platform called the Black Books Webinar, where I invite other authors to share their stories about their books. And that's a monthly event that I do. I'm also a journalist. So last year I spent time living in the Gambia, and I worked on a project with a lady called Judith Ryan called Blagzit. It's a YouTube channel about encouraging people from the diaspora to repatriate to Africa, particularly the Gambia, and to invest money. And it shared people's story along the way, because there's a lot of people that have repatriated from the diaspora, particularly from England, to
Actually,
Gambia and other parts.
your
So the
book,
continent.
because I didn't recall the name. I am my memory. It works in some magical way. So it's called The Rise of Rastafari, and it has this wonderful cover picture. Then maybe with the screen sharing, we will show it, and it has the picture, this photographic image of Haile Selassie, leader of Ethiopia, historical leader from which the movement then was born. And so I got really interested. So you are working in connection with Gambia, with a lady that you mentioned, of which I didn't capture the name. Maybe you will tell me again so I can scrub a little note. And where you are originally from, Makone? Because me personally, I am Italo-Dominican. So and I'm based with my base here with the podcast. I am based in Italy. I can hear some accent that is sort of English, Irish, and then you're talking about Gambia, you're talking about the diaspora. What's going on?
Okay, so in terms of my background, I live in England. However, my heritage-wise is my mom's family are from Jamaica, and my dad is from Malawi, which is in Southeast Africa. The reason why I mentioned Gambia is because I spent 6 months living there last year. Yeah, so I'll talk on more about my mission, as in why repatriation is important, particularly for us as Rastafarians. I went to Gambia last year for 6 months, and we actually going back again to Africa to live this time permanently to another part on the continent. But I mentioned Gambia because whilst I was there, I was doing journalist work, as I am a journalist as well. So that's why I mentioned that. So that's a little bit about in terms of my background, where I'm from. I'm curious where you're from, because you mentioned Dominica and Italy. So it's like one of your parents is Dominican, one of them Italy. Am I correct?
So yes, I have. I'm a mixed race, you would say. I mean, which really doesn't make any sense because if already you are Dominican or you're anyway from Italy, we are already mixed from the beginning. It was always mixed because of historical factors such as on the one hand the diaspora and then African descent, which then they mix between them, and all of this story that's going on, and also some indigenous people. So but I am, I have one parent, it's from Italy, and one parent, it's from Dominican Republic. So we are sort of neighbors in nearby around these islands from this Caribbean area. I am interested, I am curious regarding what style of journalism you do, what topics do you cover the most, what passions, what passion is you the most?
Well, in terms of like my journalism, I studied sports journalism at university. So I think when I was younger, it was more sports journalism I was interested into. I remember like from when I was little, I always used to, I had a godfather who had a sports center, and I used to help him out, write articles about football matches, reports, and interview the players and that kind of stuff, flyers. I was really interested in doing a lot around sports, and I used to have. I remember my mum bought me one Christmas. She bought me a video camera, and I used to use the video camera and pretend that I was like Gary Lineker Match of the Day presenting football, and then I used to have like a VCR and do recording and then cut clips into it, and I would present and then edit my own video clips and put it together in a package. And I used to like write about different football articles, and I think that's what got my interest when I was at university doing sports. But then as I was at university, I then drifted into not just sport, but I became interested in just news and things that affected the world in general, and particularly as I came into Black consciousness, and I got more and more into that, and I started to do different articles. I had an article that I did about the history of West Indian cricket, which is something I learned a little bit about West Indian cricket at university, and then I studied more outside of it, and then I had that published in a Rise of Rastafari magazine. I had an article on Mutabaruka, and I did other small Black conscious articles that were published in different newspapers out and around. Last year, I mentioned when I was in Gambia, that was more video journalism. That was me. Most of the time I was behind the camera, doing the video editing behind it and the film recording and putting the packages together. And that journalism was about really people, covering people's stories that have gone back to Gambia, businesses that are already there, and also a bit of marketing and promotion, because we showed people how to get land and how they could, in terms of properties, we went down the various properties and showed people this is what different properties that people can access and get. So I've got journalism in terms, I can do print journalism, I can do radio, I do a lot of radio, I can do radio shows, podcasts, and also I do video journalism as well.
Wow. So you have really a lot of information that as the conversation goes on, you come up with so much treasure and value in your story. So one thing, one focus, you talked about the people that are going back to Gambia and or Ghana. I was quite confused, but
well, there's people going back to both. I mean, I say Gambia, say that's what I went to, but Ghana had the return last year.
They're going back to Ghana, and this is signified that these people from African diaspora who want to resettle there or want to somehow find some sort of connection over there. Is that correct? It involves mostly people of African descent who's trying to move back, getting reconnection with their ancestry.
Exactly. That's definitely one of the reasons why people moving to Gambia or Ghana. I just use Gambia as an example because that's where I was. But they also had Ghana in 2019. Last year had the year of return, and that was massive. And so many people from the diaspora went back to Ghana and continuing to go back to Ghana to be connected with their roots, because 400 years marking since the first slaves were taken from Africa and to the Caribbean and onto the Americas. So to mark that, they had the government of Ghana put the year of return. But I think there's a growing sensation of not just Ghana or Gambia, but people are going to Rwanda, people that are going to Zambia, people that are going throughout the continent, whether it's West, Central and East Africa. There's definitely a growing interest of people to reconnect with the ancestral roots. And I think also because of what's happening to the African Caribbean communities in the diaspora.
Even if before we get into the diaspora, and that even if it's just to just have a place there or to know somebody there, or to many people will probably choose to have some sort of back and forward from whether it's England or some Western European country, but to start to have this connection point, it's very important. And it was somehow all of this movement, the Rastafari movement with the reggae music, with Jamaica as a center, and some of the brilliant, great leaders that came out and that ended up leading so many Afro-American movement and worldwide movement. You know, there is it's important. What I'm trying to say is that to have this sort of going back and this role that the Rastafari actually they played. And I have noticed in one of your articles, you talk about sort of a historical distortion. that there is by the media sort of it's sort of become like Rastafari. It's like about smoking a joint or about just the music, and it's sort of become kind of superficial. I don't know if you understand me. It's kind of like it's a trend, like it's this sort of thing. There's
Yeah.
this
I
reggae
think that's what
music
it is, yeah.
going on, and it's the joint, and it's cool because you hang out there, and there is all these white people, or you get to stay nearby the picture with some person of color or some this is a little bit trendy, and you know you have all of these dressing code that is a certain type. Many people they pick up, but they resonate with the music, but they don't really enter in deepness of what the real history is, and
And I
this is
think you've
a
got
bit
the nail
sad.
on the head spot on it. And this is the main reason why I read the book, to give that clarification, because there's definitely distortion. And just as you mentioned, what's happened in Rastafari is that say, for example, certain things of the culture, which is not necessarily attached to Rastafari, and I'll explain it later, but people are more when they associate or they think about Rastafari, people thinking of dreadlocks, people that smoke weed, reggae music, a reggae festival, these kind of things. However, the original concept of Rastafari and the intention, people are very ignorant on the actual philosophy and why it started Rastafari. And Rastafari, when it actually started, it was a movement that started in Jamaica based on, we've touched on earlier, based on Africans being taken from Africa on the continent, West and Central Africa, being disported to places such as the Caribbean, Americas, Brazils, and other places. But I'm going to focus on Caribbean, particularly the island of Jamaica here, because this is where Rastafari emerged. And because of what happened on the island of the Caribbean in terms of the process of slavery, and even after slavery, the inferiority complex of Jamaica, in terms of Jamaica was still a British colony until 1962. So what happened during slavery and the brainwashing of African people that were taught that they were in
Just a
inferior.
minute. It's very impressive. 1962 we are talking about. We are talking about that's not it's close to 50 about 50 60 years ago that that there were still the existence of colonies. These people don't realize. I don't think that people really realize or they don't really fully absorb this idea. Like when you really absorb this idea that there was colony going on up until 50 years ago when it was sort of your parents' generation, that there was actually colonialism going on. So and they don't many people don't understand the brutality and the violence that all of that implied. It's kind of hard to really fix this point in the mind. So I just want to make a little focus. Yes.
Exactly, and this is the thing. See, with Rastafari, see, a lot of people don't understand Jamaican culture, so or Jamaican history. So I say not culture, Jamaican history. Now, if you don't understand Jamaican history, you will not understand Rastafari in terms of the context of why it started in its origin. So just as I was mentioning, Jamaica was a colony till 1962. Now, during slavery, as most of us will know, the inhumane treatment of the enslaved Africans, not just physically, but also mentally. So they were literally stripped of their culture, their identity, their language, their religion, and their whole ideas and values, and being told to then adapt Eurocentric values. And that went on throughout the colonial years.
Like
And
which we by the way, the Eurocentric value that you're talking about is not the type of Eurocentric values that we are seeing today. The type of this idea of democracy, freedom of speech. We are talking about the all of these that was before in those here, you know. So it's a different. So when you talk about Eurocentric values, he's talking about a different. You're talking about a different set of Eurocentric value. Those values that implied prevailing over another culture, killing, murders, assassination, slavery, greed. So this
yeah,
sort of
it's
this aspect of the
yeah,
of the European value that hopefully
primarily
we will leave behind.
imperialism, should we say imperialism, white supremacy, that people of white skin or people that are Europeans are somehow more supreme than the black people. That's pretty much what they've been taught on the plantations, and building up even into colonial years. that's what it was like. And there's different class structures in the Caribbean, and even not just in the Caribbean, but we've seen it in Asia. You have the different caste systems that the British Empire imposed. You've seen that in various different parts. I mean, I was watching a documentary yesterday, and they were saying that when the British invaded Kenya, they built railways, but they set up a system where the first class was white, the second class was Asian, and the third class was black. So this is what I'm talking about, a kind of an imperialistic point of view where black is at the bottom.
Yes,
Now,
imperialistic and also economically convenient. It was not honestly brutalizing, because I think one of the aspects that maybe we don't see. I don't know if this is in your book. I haven't had the pleasure to read it yet, but I put it on the list. Um, but it's also the economic aspect, the idea of the economic empowerment, because on that time there wasn't so much. There wasn't in economic empowerment for the part of most black people, I suppose, in this area. So it has also a connotation of financial economical power of taking their life and matters in their own hands. I believe.
yeah, and what we actually, I think we must remember is obviously, and I think what you said again is very relevant, because the main reason, obviously, why slavery happened, the whole behind it was economics. Yeah, it was all about economics for the white slave owners to get rich or to wealthy. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had slavery. It's about generating wealth. Yeah, and even after slavery, quote unquote, ended, is what happened was the British, the slave owners in Jamaica, they were given compensation, and the Africans, the enslaved Africans, were let loose on the island of Jamaica, given no given no land, no compensation. So even though technically they was free, but they wasn't really free, because if you give a man a freedom but you don't give them anything to where they can really sustain themselves, that someone's going to struggle. So this is a problem, whereas you see even after slavery that the wealth in the Caribbean was still very much in the white society, which was dominant, which was a small percentage of the island, and the majority of black people didn't have anything. Now, during that time, there was also a need to change the mindset of the people, just because of things that we mentioned, economically, but also in terms of the value. So during that time, a lot of people, they were told to worship like the royal family, like British royal family. So it'd be like King George, or you would have like a lot of times a white picture of Jesus Christ on people's wall. Now, and they were familiar with this, so they had this kind of white worship thing going on. There was a prominent leader called Marcus Mosiah Garvey, and he tried to bring about awareness in black people, and he set up something called the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League. And one of the things that you mentioned earlier, economics, one of the things that he wanted to tackle was economics, because you realize that black people were not in a very good position, not just in Jamaica, but globally, economically, because he's a man that traveled. He'd been to America, he'd been to other parts of the world as well, England, and he saw the condition of black people in those countries, and he set up the UNIA. And his organization was very influential, because it brought together millions of people of African Caribbean heritage, and they had various different businesses. They had steam laundry shops, restaurants, coffee shops. He even had his own newspaper called the Negro World newspaper, and his intention was to take black people back to Africa. He had the Black Star Line, and his motto was, one of his mottos was race first. And what he was trying to do was really galvanize and uplift people of African Caribbean heritage. Now, in a colonial time. Now, why Marcus Garvey is significant? He was born in Jamaica, in St. Anne. He's actually one of Jamaica's first national heroes, but he's very significant, not only as a Pan-African.
I have one peculiarity about the area where he was born. That apparently many leaders, I was reading about some article and documentaries, actually many readers and musicians, and they actually came from this sort of area, or this village where he came from. This I was impressed. I don't know if it's true news, but
No,
it's
it's
sort
true.
of like a bunch of people that just popped out of there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true. St. Anne is a popular. Jamaica is a very small island, so there's a lot of people. When you say one part of Jamaica, you can say, oh yeah, there's a lot of people that come from that part of Jamaica as well. But yeah, he was born in St. Anne, Jamaica. But Marcus Garvey, he's really significant as a Pan-Africanist in trying to lift black people up. Yeah. And why he's significant in Rastafari right now, and I want to talk about the link into Rastafari right now, is not only was he a Pan-Africanist, but Marcus Garvey, he'd basically been propagating that people of Africa repatriate, but also look towards Africa, yeah, for their own sense of spirituality, yeah. And Marcus Garvey, there's various different quotes and speeches that he done which pointed towards Ethiopia, Africa, and he was saying that black people's deliverance must come through a black spectacle, for African spectacle in Ethiopia. It's not about us looking at
Yeah, in a historical time that was also, I believe, very, very, very racially polarized. It still is now, but the levels that it was back then, we cannot imagine of how crazy or the total neurosis that it could have been about these the issues around race. I cannot
yeah.
imagine. If you just look at what's going on now. Some of the crazy.
I think what you look at Marcus Garvey and see that all he achieved during his time and what he was able to do without this kind of technology that we have, we're speaking here in the different countries on Zoom, without having all of this kind of modern technology, he was able to accomplish so much. And with Marcus Garvey, in terms of saying that if we are to look at kind of any idols or masters or heroes, it's time now that we start to look within, because we've been looking at and idolizing another set of people for so many long who have been actually oppressing black people in that particular situation. So it's time we look at our own. So when Emperor Haile Selassie was crowned in 1930, King of Kings and Lord of Lords, he became emperor of Ethiopia. Before that, he was King Negus. Now, when he was crowned emperor, that was very significant because the followers of Marcus Garvey, people like Leonard Percival Howell, who's accredited to be the first Rasta, Archibald Dunkley, Joseph Hibbert, and Robert Hines, they were Garveyites coming out of Marcus Garvey's organization. Now,
Yeah,
when
actually, I'm interested what you're covering, but maybe then we can go back to this historical four Rastas that you talked about. You call them the historical or the forefathers of the Rastafarian movement. If maybe you can give us some little takes about their history, or just because we have to think that in all these historical contexts, there was a lot of movement coming out. There was this Selassie coming out from Ethiopia, but there was a lot of movement going on also in United States in terms of intellectual that came out, the Dubois and so many. So it was this just this crazy moment that was going on with Marcus Garvey in this Jamaica. So it was really worldwide. There was so much going on.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely. There was a lot going on with other movements. You had, obviously, later on the Black Panthers, Nation of Islam in America. A lot of different movements that were happening. We're going now speaking about the founding fathers of the Rastafari, and this is another significant part of my book because I actually dedicate the book to them, because a lot of people, again, who are familiar with Rastafari culture, even people that call themselves Rastafarian, they do not know or know very little, if any, about the founding fathers of Rastafari. Yeah, which is a travesty within itself, because if you're part of any kind of movement or organization, you should know information about the people that started it and why it founded.
Yeah, which is I can see with so many people they actually will put on their dreadlock or certain hairstyle, which is cool because there is the music. So the music, first of all, the music breaks so many barriers. I believe maybe I believe even more than politics. Or than so many other contexts of organization, because the musician or the artist can go beyond certain barriers that no one else can, because of this creativity. So you can see a lot of people from a lot of cultures they immediately made with this music. But I see so many they just some people will do their hair in a certain way, and they're not really from this culture. They don't really understand why. Maybe they want to show some sort of solidarity, or maybe they are attracted to the sound, and the knowledge comes later. But I believe that this musical the musical impact is the first contact with the young people. That should be the sort of the ticket for this, what is behind all of this culture that is behind this, what we are talking about. I don't know if you can understand me.
No, I
It should,
understand you very
the
clear.
music should be the attraction to then understand some more,
Yeah,
understand
exactly. I
literal
mean,
and this what's going on behind.
music
Because
should be
otherwise, it
one
makes no
thing.
sense when you ask
Yes,
question
exactly.
why, what's going on with this hair or this style you have, and everything collapse, kind of.
Exactly, I'm with you. Like, for example, when I came into Rastafari at first, I listened to a lot of reggae music, but then Lassie, and then I wanted to find out more. I didn't just listen to reggae and say, "Oh, I'm Rasta," and put on dreadlocks and that. So I then decided to find out more about Rastafari. I do my own research, speak to Rastafarians, go to event, and find out exactly what it is. And you're spot on. And what happens then with reggae is that people that are not necessarily for the culture, Rastafari, I'm gonna say Rastafari is a Black Power movement. Yeah. Now I'm not saying I'm discriminating against people, but that's what it is. It's set up to uplift people of black people.
Although people from all over the world, they can associate with the sound. That be because music, it communicates or vibrates. It actually has. I have seen some music that I listen to. It actually changed my state of mind and the way I feel in this moment. So that's the fact that some people that pick it up and they listen to it,
Yeah.
etc., may actually change the
Let me come
mood,
back.
and they may meditate as to
Yeah.
some struggles or something they're going through. So it can be also encouraging for so many other people. But like you say, it's a Black Power movement, and this is what I want to discover. Actually the real role that it had in the Black Power
Yeah.
movement, and
And
how strong
and
it
I think
was actually.
and I think what you're saying there is that, I mean, some agreement is like, yeah, exactly. People can like associate, or people. I'm not saying a white person can't listen to a regular Asian person. Everyone can listen to any kind of music. Yeah, that's
And
not
some
the.
they do some really great music too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There was
I
some
mean,
crazy. I was looking some blues or some hip hop from Korea, no, not South Korea. I found out it existed. I didn't even know it existed, and they're just
yeah. So
going, So it's
I can get people of multiple cultures can support reggae music, and you can even be understand or be sympathetic of the movement. But we have to be true when we look at the origins of the fact that it's a movement that's been about of an oppressed people that have been oppressed through slavery, colonialism, and even up until this continuous day. That is about fighting the system and really breaking the chains, not just physically, but mentally, and unlocking the chains, and about Black people being proud of themselves, looking to repatriate to Africa. I mean, in even the Caribbean, you cannot tell a lot of people, even to this day, that they are African. And what Rastafari came about, I see a correlation with Rastafari in a group called the Maroons in Jamaica. Maroons are a group that fought in slavery, and they developed in Jamaica. They developed their own community, and they fought against the British, and they was given their own sovereignty land. And the correlation I see with Rastafari is a group similar that has fought
about the Maroons. It must have been previous to the era of all this reggae. I mean, what was it? 17th century, 18th century?
yes, yes, you're looking at the Maroon century. The Maroon during slavery, those centuries, and the correlation I see with Rastafari, because Rastafari as well is a movement that a people, particularly Leonard Howe, set up a pinnacle in 1941, which was the most self-sufficient economically commune in Jamaica, and it was to break away really from the colonial government and the system, and to say that, you know what, we are separate, we are African, we are different, we are about economically empowering ourselves and being self-sufficient, independent, within our own nation, a nation within a nation. So when I look at Rastafari, I see the correlation as a group of people that have seeking to gain their own sovereignty, yeah, and to break away from the unjust power structure that was there, which was white people in Jamaica during those times. So what they're trying to do is break away from that, whether it was through slavery and now in Rastafari, the colonial government, and trying to do for self and be independent. And that's the basis of why Rastafari started about. Something I touched on earlier is that even not just even spiritually, and I was speaking about Marcus Garvey, the significance of Haile Selassie when he became Emperor of Ethiopia was, at that time, people in Africa had not, people in Jamaica and the Caribbean, even to this day, had not seen many people a Black king or queen before, because they was taught to idolize, you know what, the British king, the British queen. And that concept of Haile Selassie brought back a memory of, yes, there's royalty from Africa, and that some of us were kings and queens because African people in the Caribbean have been completely whitewashed of their history. So they've been told that their history started with slavery. So that was very, very significant. Ethiopia today is the only independent African country that's not being colonized. So what is very, very important from Rastafari, and this is why I'm saying it's a Black Power movement, because its
I
genesis.
mean, as about Ethiopia, yeah, the Italians they tried, and then there is some history, also some controversy. But there's some history I was looking through. that actually they maintained in Ethiopia, the Ethiopians, most the control of most lands. And although there was a certain propaganda going on in Italy as to, yes, we are winning, situation is going great, in reality, I think the Italians, they control some main cities, but they didn't really control the farmland or the mountains, all of these where so many people were taking refuge. And I was reading, because I was studying this historical period here in high school, and somewhere around this area, and there was actually two different history going on: the history that was told by some historical books to this day, and the history that was talked by some Ethiopian researcher and some other research. And so I kind of remember this, and I remember that there's actually Ethiopia, there was a big part that wasn't in fact wasn't never totally colonized. There was a war going on until they penetrate inside, and there was all this. But I'm not the expert. I'm just putting there the
Yeah, that's another significant thing that you mentioned, the Italian Ethiopian War. So that happened in 1935, and what happened was Italy had tried to invade Ethiopia prior to 1935 in I think it was 1880, 1890 something. They tried to invade in the Battle of Adwa, but
yes, there was
Emperor Haile
something going
Selassie was in
on.
charge. Menelik was in charge. I can't remember the exact year, but they tried to invade Ethiopia previously, about 35, about 40 years previously before that, which they was unsuccessful. Now this time they tried to come back into in Ethiopia under Benito Mussolini's regime. Yeah, and a reason why they wanted to invade Ethiopia was because Ethiopia was the only country in Africa that had not been colonized. Also, there was a bit of pretty much revenge they kind of wanted to get back from the Ethiopians defeating Italy previously.
That, and there was some pressure going on in Italy because some, they wanted to create this idea of empire that was going on, some empire venture, and there was
Yes,
this
they
some
wanted to restore the Roman Empire, like a great empire like
yes,
they used
or
to.
at least created this idea we are talking in back in the day, like we were talking about technology. There wasn't some technology going on. You could create an idea with the press that there was going on some super incredible empire on the other side of the sea. Uh,
Propaganda.
yeah, some sort of propaganda. This was going on. That was, I mean, we've seen it now with what's going on with the crazy fake news and disinformation, and that it's deliberate, really deliberate. So you can imagine back then when there was reaching the information was a process, no?
Yeah. So following up now onto the war, you had the Italian invasion in 1935 of Ethiopia. Now, quite rightfully, as you said, the Italians, they managed to get a grip on some of the places in Ethiopia, the major cities like Addis Ababa, but they wasn't able to fully penetrate Ethiopia. And even up until when the Ethiopians took back control of the country, it wasn't all possessed in Italy. There was still Ethiopians there on the ground. Now, with the Italian Ethiopian War, it was a tragedy in the sense that so many Ethiopians lost their lives. And the reason why is because the Italians who manufactured a lot of the weaponries in Italy, the Ethiopians wasn't able to quite combat the Italians at first, because in Ethiopia, they don't manufacture any weapons themselves. So they only had like spears and swords, or the good weapons that they had would be weapons that they maybe captured for the Italians. Now, there was appeal in the League of Nations that Haile Selassie went to the League of Nations and he made appeal to say that both Italy and Ethiopia were part of the League of Nations, and within that organization, it prohibits one nation from invading to another nation. So when Haile Selassie went there, he said, hold on, this is wrong, because Italy and us are part of the same group organization, but they're invading us. Now, at that time, England wanted to appease Italy, because they looked at the situation, and obviously World War One had already happened previously, and they didn't really want to blow in another world war, and they thought it would make more sense to appease Italy with a big strong army rather than Ethiopia, to them look like this a small backward kind of medieval looking country which didn't really have that military in the eyes of the British. So they even offered a Italy, the land of Ethiopia, even though it wasn't theirs, they actually decided to offer them the land. And what the England and some of the other European nations did was that they refused to give any weaponry to the Italians or to the Ethiopians. Now that put Ethiopia in a bad position because, as I mentioned, they don't manufacture their own weapons in Ethiopia. So it basically gave the green light for the Italians to really take over the country. Later on, the stance of the British changed. Haile Selassie went into exile in England in Bath, yeah, and it changed because Italy had been aligned with Adolf Hitler's regime, yeah, and because Italy had been aligned with Adolf Hitler's regime, Germany, that meant that automatically
this was
that
going
the
on
Italians were enemy.
was going on very fast, because I think they actually breached through in Ethiopia around 1937. So this was going on all in a few years before they really some Mussolini made a really big move toward Hitler. So it was going on all in some few years that all of these were playing out so fast.
Yeah, and yeah. So when it, it, um, it Benito Mussolini um, joined forces with Adolf Hitler and Germany, England then became enemies of them naturally because Germany and England were fighting against the war. So then the English, with the Ethiopian troops, went into Ethiopia and they fought alongside the Ethiopian troops, and then Ethiopia gained back control of the country.
And they gave them also the weapons for so many, because as from this article, I wish I could share it. This article I was reading that there was so many. There was of this military from Ethiopia. They was gathering up in these remote areas. They was waiting to go back and do war because it's stronger in number and all of this. But there was some issue with the weaponry, where the weaponry will come, and as to how they was going to fighting, the war, and what strategy with what And I think there is also a dark page where there was because they were developing new weapon technology in terms of gases and chemicals that they were trying to use around. They both use in Libya and around there. And so that's why there was
So
so
they
many
used
dead. I was kind of, I'm not an expert on the topic, but
So they used mustard gas. So the Italians used mustard gas, which was banned illegal by international law for being so brutal. So mustard gas was used on the country of Ethiopia, and obviously millions of people died not because of mustard gas and because of obviously the war in Ethiopia, and even some of the farmland. It caused problems with a lot of the agriculture land, but hundreds of thousands of Ethiopians lost their lives as a result of the war.
and up until well, I will ask you one more question, and then I will find this information for it's very interesting. And I would like to get into the Pan-African side of the Rastafarian movement, how it actually connected the Jamaican and the Caribbeans and everyone. It connected and sort of created this collaboration that went on between the Africans and all of these other countries, including from South America and in the Caribbean, because in United States, which at the time wasn't very obvious for Black people to go there, a sort of diplomat for this idea of nation, that all Black people, they're brothers, and there's this sort of idea of nation, and start actually negotiating for themselves, and sort of also trespassing these other diplomats or white diplomats, etc., and all of these other people, and just starting to really talk to their African brothers and their neighbors, etc., and starting organizing. So.
Right, the Pan-African side of Rastafari, I'm glad you mentioned, is the most important aspect of Rastafari, because what you have in Rastafari is, I would say, there's three main aspects which people look at, which is the Pan-African side, the cultural perspective of Rastafari, which you've mentioned, like the lots, the reggae, and all of that. And then you have the spiritual or religious side. So some people see Rasta as a religion, some people don't. I don't myself. But those are three main parts. But people mainly gravitate, I think, more to the culture or the spiritual religious side. But the Pan-African element, I'm glad we're talking about this, is the reason really why it started. Now, I've spoken about some of it early, such as the connection with Marcus Garvey.
So talking about, before we will get into that, my little detail is that one famous journalist up until lately in Italy, which name was Montanelli. and he's done some tremendous career in journalism. And when there was the racial uprisings from the Black Lives Movement triggered by George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and so many others in this moment, it came out that this man, because he was former fascist in the former fascist army, he was, I think, exactly in Ethiopia as a fascist before he became literate, because before he became an author and actually became part of all of the cultural movement that then occurred in the 70s, 80s in Italy. And what was going on, it was one situation that was called Madamato, where they had the fascists, they came there, they have a child, female slave, sex slave girls that they was abusing, etc. And that is why, among so many other, there was also some attack, some terroristic attack on this figure. So basically, so there is this other dark page of the Ethiopian history. You know, the fact the sexual abuse that was done by the invaders and by the Italians who tried to of the time of Mussolini, who tried to colonize, and how some of this actually then entered into the elite when the page changed, and how then it triggered in Italy all a bunch of situation that was going on between the left and the right, and during the Cold War, and the dark years they call of lead, where there was the terrorism, in which this figure Montanelli also got involved, because they attempted also his life wrongfully, because it's violence. But so this I wanted to add. I mean, wrong. I mean, this they will judge whoever will listen.
Okay. No, no,
And
I
yeah,
completely understand
so
that. Um,
sex slavery, it's also on woman and on child, that was going on in Africa by the people who colonized, and also it's a page that was not so much talked about, you know, because whoever was the abuser and was in charge of these people of plantation, or was in war times, etc. In that time, there wasn't a record, there wasn't a follow through, and they could basically do anything they wanted to. So many of them, and they would, and so there is. That is why there is so much also psychological trauma, and so much, you know, all of this going on in that remained, you know, over century. Please, I had you back the word. I don't want to interrupt too much.
no, that's fine. I don't want to try to drift too much away from what you initially said. You talk about the Pan-African element of Rastafari, right? And why that's important, because I touched on it earlier, is that the origins of people, particularly in the Caribbean, is from Africa. And the whole essence of Rastafari is about reconnecting with the ancestral homeland, the culture, and everything that was kind of was taken away, and reclaiming Africa, yeah, whether that is literally going there, but also spiritually, yeah. And so this identity was created by people like Marcus Messiah Garvey, and even people before Marcus Messiah Garvey. The whole Back to Africa movement and repatriation is a big a big part of it. One of the ultimate main principles of Rastafari is repatriation to Africa, and being disconnected away, taken from Africa. There's a longing, and I think a longing is in most Black people of Africa, in some consciousness, in some way, even if those don't literally want to go there. There's a definitely awareness, because that's where we came from. So the reason why that Pan-Africanism is so important is because it's connecting us back to Africa, where we are our initial homeland, and also the importance of Haile Selassie and us being connected with Africa, when Marcus Garvey had said that, where's the black man's king, where's the black man's kingdom, where's the black man's emperor? And it was created in terms of us as Black people to find the salvation within, and to find self, rather than to find an external salvation. And Africa, it was crucial, because what Rasta has done in terms of Pan-Africanism, creating a Pan-African identity, as it has taken various different aspects from Africa and morphed into a kind of Pan-African identity. So I look at Emperor Haile Selassie, yeah, as an emperor from Ethiopia, because obviously in Africa, we didn't know, Africa is a continent, not a country, that we didn't know exactly where we came from. Yes, we knew West Africa and Central Africa, but what Rastafari did was look at the whole of Africa and say, like, we are Africans, regardless of, one, the barriers need to be that were imposed by the Europeans, that needs to go. So Ethiopia, Haile Selassie. Now you have Nyabingi. Nyabingi is from Uganda and Rwanda. Now Nyabingi is an order that was used to fight against the British in Uganda, Rwanda. Now there's a famous queen called Queen Mahomusa. She was called Queen Nyabingi, and that's where the faction, the group Rastafari Nyabingi comes from. Yeah, from Uganda, Rwanda. You have a group in Kenya called the Mau Mau Warriors. Yeah, and the Mau Mau Warriors were fighting against the British to get independence. And in the mid 50s, imagery in the Caribbean came out of the Mau Mau Warriors having their hair in dreadlocks, and this is where the dreadlocks come. So a lot of Rastafarians, they then saw the imagery in the Mau Mau Warriors and copied that imagery, and then started to grow their hair in locks. You have the Ashanti tribe in Ghana, and the Bob Ashanti group of Rastafari claim to be descendants of the Ashanti tribe. Ashanti, there are so many different links between Ghana and Caribbean. A lot of the slaves were taken from Ghana. You have like the Maroons I mentioned earlier, the warriors like Achimpom, Nani, Taki. A lot of them were Karamanti, were from Ghana, from the Ashanti. The Jamaican flag is even colored of the same colors as the Ashanti flag. So a lot of connections between Ghana and the Caribbean. So this is just an example how various different aspects of Africa have been taken and morphed into a Pan-African identity, whereas we've just said we're not just going to claim one part of Africa, we're going to say we're claiming the whole of Africa. Ethiopia has a special significance because Haile Selassie ruled there, but what we are saying is that, like Marcus Garvey said, Africa for the Africans, those at home and those abroad.
Wow, wow. And that was some pretty, I mean, first of all, I find it fascinating, the whole story, and just crazy about the Mau Mau, and then how all things just connect. And you have, and also just some very courageous people that we had historically to say certain things today. We give for granted to say certain things in certain historical time. It was not so obvious. And that being said, I want to just let me see if we can get your book there on the screen, so that whoever will be watching will be available to just see the book cover. So I'm looking it out for you. One multiple share the screen. I'm trying not to. There you have it. Can you see the screen? Or what's going on?
I can see you. I can't see the screen.
Okay, just you can see me like usual, eh?
I can still see you.
What about now?
Yeah.
Can you see your book?
It says you're starting your screen share now.
Wow.
But it's got a black screen.
Yeah.
I can see it now.
Can you see
I can
it?
see it's got the top of my page.
It's got the top of your page. Can you guys?
Yeah.
So that's actually your book.
Yeah, but you need to scroll down. Yeah, I can see it now.
So that is actually the Rise of Rastafari from Makonnen Sankofa, and you can find this on Amazon, and and just all over on the website. But Makonnene you will tell me all the information. For the moment, I will stop the screen sharing because it's kind of messing with my Wi-Fi. But anyway, for those watching, this is the cover of the book, and that's what's really where Makonnene, where he get down to all of this fascinating history. So now I'm back. Is the screen gone?
The best place to buy it is going to be on Amazon. On Amazon as well, they can ship it. They'll ship it directly to you.
It's the screen share gone?
Yeah, I can see you now.
Okay, cool. So yeah, Amazon, you're really big on Amazon. So I don't know. What you say, Makonnene? We have covered quite a lot of topics. One topic I would maybe like to say at last, the resistance to white supremacy, and how actually some history has affected us to up until yesterday, up until the Black Lives Movement, and how it involves everyone, up until today, how this history is still alive, whether it was for the Italians, whether it was Ethiopian, they was having holding some grouges regarding the previous war, or whether it was this journalist that I mentioned that was involved in all of this, who then had this all of this cause effect later on in life, and how we are sort of kind of all connected from all over the world in some weird some strange way with all these things happening. So that I think it's curious. um and what yes. mm,
So
uh
I'll come and talk about this now. Yeah, I'm okay. So when you talk about now resistance to white supremacy, and I touched on a bit of it earlier, but this is still relevant to this day. And just as I mentioned before, when we was talking about slavery, colonialism, up until this day, we are, as people of African Caribbean heritage, we are still discriminated everywhere we look at in the world, and that could be in a work environment. Yeah, it could be if you're looking at you mentioned the George Floyd, the police brutality incident. It could be there's whether it's Jim Crow or civil rights, which happened in America, apartheid, which happened in South Africa in the 70s and 80s. In England, you might not be aware of this, but it was a very, very racist this country in the 70s and 80s when my parents were
but
brought
just
into the country, and
and
still the institutional.
I love to get into the institutional and maybe into how racist it was when you 70s and 80s, how it was at the time of your parent, if you can do about something, and we'll let you talk. But just think about Meghan, the married to the this Prince of England, and she's really light, belly to the royal family. She's really a light skin, very light skin black person of color, obviously from the African diaspora because of family and everything. But apparently, what they say is that she's the most hated woman apparently on social media. Um, so just think about that. Mm.
You use an example for it for that. I mean, again, I think that's just coming in again with the same demonstration. This, well, or the power structure that exists in the world, to we say the Western world. Again, it's there to it denigrates things African, things black, anything African, anything that black is perceived as inferior and of a lower standard and a lower quality of life. As opposed to things that are European and Eurocentric, and that exactly what you said. It's just
and
another.
and what the part of what the Rastafarian movement did, etc. It is also a self-esteem job. It did a job of where at least the people that are of black diaspora don't feel that way, even if for some people in the world, or for so many, or for the general culture, they
Yeah.
are viewed that way. But at least the blacks, or we can say that we don't feel this way. You understand me? So it gave them a kind of a different perspective as to who we are, because the the way that this racism penetrate when there is so much violence, it also changes the idea of your own self-image. Um,
And what we say is equal rights and justice for all, regardless of whatever color and skin color you are. Yeah. Now, I don't think this ideology. I don't think I'm better than someone because I'm African or black or a white person. Neither is a white person better than me because of color of skin. We're talking about equal right and justice for all, but we realize what we're fighting against is that we've been put at a lower level, and we need to get ourselves up where we're at least seen as equal. That's what we're saying as a Black Power movement. That's what we're fighting against. I'm not fighting to be superior and to rule over white man. I'm just fighting what we are fighting for. What we're saying is that we need to be at least seen or treated as equals.
Yes, seen and treated as equal. This is for sure. This is what we are fighting up to until this day, whether there is so much racism and so much white supremacy. But what the cultural movement of the time did, they also helped the black people start to seeing themselves as valuable, and and willing and able to do. This is what I said. They kind of
Racial
change the
pride,
self-perception that we have
knowing
of
self,
ourselves.
and racial pride. And this again, this is exactly why it's very important to us as Black people, because we've been denied and we've been taught to think that, you know what, to hate ourselves and to see other Black people and despise them because of their color skin, or hate this color of our skin, hate our own natural hair, and all of these
Because
kind
of
of.
this projection that comes from society, this projection when they made some races lower and some races below, and you know, where they made all of this crazy, this was going on, you know, all of these
So
crazy racial logics.
so these are things based on the Black experience externally, and this is why this is why to me a white person cannot be a Rastafari, because it's based on the Black experience of whether it's the connection through ancestrally with Africa, being enslaved, our experience of being told that we're low, and being told that to hate and being told to hate ourselves and things African are backwards. This is something which has been imposed on us through our DNA, through us like this, and we are fighting against it. So a white or Asian person is a person coming from another culture who doesn't have that same experience. Yeah, so they've been able to see the Queen or Queen of England. They've been able to see idols or people to work in their own kind of image, but we've been denied everything. And what we are just trying to say is to reclaim our identity and our heritage. So what I'm trying to say is that this is a Rastafari is an experience unique to people of African Caribbean heritage. So someone of another culture coming into it can support it or maybe able to associate certain things, but they can't get the full grips of it.
Yes, yes, they can't. I can kind of. I fully understand your point of view, and it's very interesting. And yes, like you said, some people can associate with, because also there is a lot of violence, no, around the world. So many violence between so many minorities that's persecuted. So someone who may be in an oppressed situation may really associate with this type of music, because you know, so many around the world, really, we come from a world and a history of violence, you know. Just look at, I was talking the other day with some historian, he's expert about Armenian history, and they just look at all the persecution from this Armenian, and how all of this history and all of this beef it's gone on up until yesterday, up until today, actually. You know, all of this hatred and all of this being persecuted, all of this crazy, you know. But this was just yeah, something I wanted to add. Yes. So, do you perceive now in your situation when you went to Ghana? What was the cultural impact from you, from your background, coming from England, being with your parents in the '70s, being treated a certain way in England, and being etc. Now you go your first time in your life, you go to Africa. What happens, and what it triggered in you? What emotion? What reflection? What was you expecting, and what was the reality of it? Please.
That's a great question. Now, me going to Africa for the first time, I've been there 3 times now, and when I went there, I've been Gambia each times. I wasn't used to like the propaganda of Africa. Some people are still, or are people still in the mindset of Africa, jungle, mud huts, things they are backwards because of what we've been saying, what they've been taught. Now, I mean, as a Rastafarian Pan-Africanist, Africa was, to me, I was very looking forward to it, and I knew that Africa wasn't going to be like that, and that for years of obviously talking about it, reading about Africa, it being literally a central part of my consciousness. So for me to go there was obviously, that's like the final part of the pyramid, is obviously to go and live there and to be on the ground there physically. So when I went there, I was going in the high spirits. It exceeded my expectations every time I went there. I think it was very emotional, yes, to be reconnected with where ancestrally people came from. Now, I've got interesting background because, yes, my mum's side is Jamaican, but my dad is actually from Africa, Malawi, which he was actually born and raised in Africa and then came here. So I think maybe some of that comes through as well from my dad's side, even though I wasn't raised with my dad, but I still have that in me, in my genes. So when I went there, I was able to connect with the people very well. Even to this day, I'm still in communication with a lot of people in Gambia. And to be honest, I sometimes connect with African people there on the continent well, better than I could contact with white European people in here. And I get along with all kinds of people. I'm an easygoing person to get along with people regardless of the race. But I did find that I was able to even connect more with Africans, even though I was born in England, than with white European people in England. And I think with Gambia particularly, because obviously Africa is very diverse, but Gambia, their culture, they have taken certain aspects of Jamaica, that they love reggae music for once. Everywhere you go, restaurants, clubs, you'll hear reggae music, and they're familiar with like people that have traveled there from Jamaica. So they're very warm and welcoming to places. And there's a big tourism industry, so they're used to people going there abroad. An interesting culture that they've got there is they've got the culture there where it takes a village to raise a child. And you definitely notice it when you go there. It's like anyone. I remember a girlfriend I had at the time, and her mum's friend was there, and she was like, she'll call out her auntie, even though, or that's she sees her as her mum, even though it's not her mum, but that's the kind of respect that they have for older people there. If you see someone older, that's your auntie, or you treat them like your auntie or father, and there's a real community spirit and community cohesion. Everyone looks after everyone there. So it could be in extended families, people live. One person's job is to get the rice, another person to get the fish. People have different roles. And even when I was there, I saw that there was certain times, for example, where I stayed, my electricity or my water might have went off for some time. You might call a friend who goes, gets his bucket from the borehole in the ground, and everyone has got little things that they can help out. And it's a very, very family orientated in terms of how people, even how they treat strangers. I give you an example. I was one time I was getting a taxi, and this time it was in the rainy season, and there was a massive puddle waterlogged from me to get to my side of the road from where I lived, from where the driver dropped me. I'm 6'3", so I'm quite a big guy. The driver offered to take me on his back and carry me through the water puddle to my accommodation. Yeah. Another time it was rainy season and I was getting out. The driver came across the road, another driver, and he took my bags and helped me get across the road. So this is just a kind of spirit. Anywhere you go in the Gambia, people will welcome you in and say, do you want to have food? Do you want to have lunch? They all sit around a table and have a bowl, and they eat from a spoon or their hand together. They have communal food, communal eating. So this is just some of the culture that I saw when I was over there in the Gambia.
Wow, wow, wow. So you perceive it that the experience was good, and you a very welcoming people, and apparently some amazing values. Especially I like the part about the respect of the elderly, this sense of community. And I mean, that's really some experiences that no one can take away. So now we have done a really holistic, quite long, I believe, deep conversation. Would you like to give to any person of color, anyone visiting, wanting to visit Africa or to approach it for the first time? Would you want to give 3 or 4 or 5 advice for anyone? You know.
Yeah, I would say the first thing is to experience it yourself. Don't listen to what people say, because the media, the Western news, has particularly been used as a tool to make Africa look bad and backwards. And I'll use an example of this, is that when something happens in Africa, whether there is war, like say for example, at the moment in Ethiopia, there's some unrest in Tigray, in a part of Ethiopia, province of Ethiopia. However, you may have like Boko Haram in Nigeria, but which is in just a small part of Nigeria. Now, how the Western media will portray is that there's war going on in the whole of Ethiopia, or the whole of Africa for that matter. When SARS or Ebola hit Sierra Leone, it was like Africa has got Ebola, rather than it's only in Sierra Leone or it's in this certain place of Africa. Nigeria, Boko Haram, which is in a specific part of Nigeria, where Nigeria is such a massive country which has got over 200 million population there. It's like saying that there's violence going on in a small city in England, which is far, far away outside of London, and that reflects the whole of England. So this is why I think we need to go there for ourselves and get the experience. I think now as well, there's a lot of people on social media that have platforms like like what we used to do with Blagsit, like people like Wodamaya, Diana Samir, that are actually in these countries, that you can see more of a real life experience of what it's like, of the day-to-day reality in these countries, and you can actually communicate and interact with people there. We're in a time now where it's easy to make connections with people all over the parts of the world, so you can make these connections with people, and it can make the transition for you easier, but you really have to go there and experience it yourself. You cannot rely on what the news makes of it.
It's just go there with an open mind, an open heart, and don't be biased by the media or by the over reading, of the papers, of the books, etc., or by this fantasy you have of what Africa would be. Instead, just be there, be in the moment, and be together with the people.
Exactly.
So we want to say, add last take, or last. I think it's important. For example, what I'm curious if you want to just give me what was your biggest reason why you went. What was your biggest moment, your decisive moment? If you want to share this experience before we get to the end, the moment where you say, okay, I'm going on the plane, I'm going to Africa, I'm doing this.
Well, it was when my friend Justin Muhammad, me and him had been speaking for a long time about going to Ghana, and he's actually got land in Ghana, and he travelled to various parts of Africa, and I, like I said, being on this African consciousness route, he told me he was going to Gambia this time, and he said that yeah, you can come to Gambia if you want to. He invited me, and I said yes, I would come. So I made myself available to go. For me, it was at the right time because I was financially stable at the time, so I could afford to do it. Um, I think it was also right for me because because I was going with someone that I knew that had been in Africa before, and he was also going with friends that he knew that had connections there. So I think sometimes it's different sometimes if you go in it on your own, whereas you go in there with a person you know, or other people that have got connections there, or that have already been to Africa before. And I think for me, that added a comfort as well, that I wasn't just going to the unknown, that I had a friend who'd already been traveled in Africa that I could go amongst. And for the last, I think, year or 6 months building up to then, I'd always been trying to put myself in contact with people that had connections on the continent, which is something that's very, very important when you are going there. Because you will build relationships and connections with people there, but to already have connections in place for when you go in there just makes the transition a hell of a lot more smoother. And I think these were the reasons why it was the right time for me to go to Africa.
Okay, great. So, great advice. Make your connection. Use the social media leverages for those who want to go. Try to build at least to have one person or like two person. At least there they can give you a guiding hands at least at the beginning, can help with the transition. And this was our podcast, our event with Makonnen Sankofa, The Rise of Rastafari. You can find his book for those who's interested on the Amazon. And thanks for being here.
Thank you.